In Chapter 1, we'll talk about sampling and data. By the end of this chapter, a student should be able to state the different terminology of basic statistics and be able to distinguish between two branches of statistics. There is the descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics. It is also important that you can understand the difference between an observational study and an experiment or an experimental study. There's quite a few key concepts that we'll talk about. We'll learn about the types of data, the types of variables and their measurement levels, different sampling techniques that can be done. How do we design experiments? There are many different types of surveys that we can use to collect data. All of them are subject to bias. We'll learn about those sources of bias. And then lastly, we'll talk about some common misuses of statistics. To begin with, statistics is the process of conducting studies to collect, organize, summarize, analyze, and draw conclusions from data. So that's what we're talking about when we say statistics. Again, there's two branches. There is the descriptive statistics. What will happen here is we'll be organizing and just summarizing the data. Lots of times we'll do that using graphs, or we might use a numerical value such as an average. After we're done talking about descriptive statistics, we'll talk about the inferential statistics, and this is where we're actually going to try and draw some conclusions from the data. Now, none of this will be hard and set in stone, so we're going to try and draw some conclusions, and then we're going to talk about how confident are we in these conclusions that we've drawn, and the way we will do that is using the mathematical concept of probability. So what is data? Well, data consists of information, specific values. We can get that from observations or from counts or from measurements or from responses. Data can be numbers or words. If we're talking about a single value of data, sometimes you'll hear the word datum. That's the official word for a single value of data. Oftentimes, though, we'll use this word, an observation, to mean a single value of data. Okay? And the observation is in a data set. What is the data set? Well, it's the collection of all data values. So the first thing we have to do is figure out what type of data will we be collecting given the circumstance we're looking at. So let's say, for example, a poll asks participant, if the participant has ever flown on an airplane. Well, there's only two types of responses a participant was going to give. They're either going to give the yes response, they've flown on an airplane, or no, I've never flown on an airplane. So in this case, the data would be yes or no. A researcher might be measuring the height of horses in inches. Well, the types of data that could happen there is if you have a horse that's 3 feet tall, 36 in inches would be the corresponding data. You might say 51, you might find some that are 74, etc., etc. Lastly, we could go to a parking lot and examine the cars that are in that parking lot, and then record the make of each vehicle. So the type of data we could collect there might be, say, Saturn, or the car might be a Ford, or it might be an Audi, etc., etc., etc. Another important distinction that we will make in statistics is about populations versus samples. So, statistics is usually studying a population. Now, a population, we think about that lots of times in being in terms of people, and that's true. It can be a collection of persons, but it can also be a collection of places or things. It doesn't matter. It's what we're trying to study. But the thing is that entire populations are quite large, and this makes them difficult to study. So instead, what we'll do is we'll look at a portion, which is a subset of the population, because it's easier to study. But we have to pick a sample or this subset of the population, and the process of selecting the sample is called sampling. Okay? So say, for example, in this picture, what we're trying to look at here is all of these individuals. In this case, we would say this is the population. And then we can pick randomly different people in this population and pull them out, and we would have a smaller group. That smaller group would be the sample. Sometimes the way this gets drawn is if we draw one great big circle and we let this represent the entire set. Well, the entire set is the population. So this is the entire set. Then we can pull out a certain subset. Okay, so this represents a subset when you put the smaller circle inside, and that subset of the population is called the sample. Once we know about the difference between the population and the sample, then the next distinction we will make is between parameters and statistics. Okay. So we'll be doing measurements. So parameters are measurements that are found using the entire population, whereas a statistic is a measurement from sample data. Now, we use a statistic because it's more easily obtained, and we're going to use that to estimate the value of this population parameter. That is the measurement of the entire population, because it's difficult to obtain the actual population parameter. So we'll have some variables that go along with parameters and statistics. If, say, you were looking to find the mean of the entire population, like the average height of all Americans, that is a parameter. It belongs to the population. We give it this symbol. This symbol is called mu. Now that would be really hard to determine the average height of every single American. So we could pull out, say, 20,000 people and measure their heights, and then take the average of that, okay, or the mean of that. So the mean of the sample gets this symbol. This symbol is red X bar. Sometimes we'll talk about the proportion of a population. It's really just a percentage. So if we're saying 75% of all Americans do X, Y, or Z, we would use this symbol, a capital P, to represent that 75%. Again, that would be difficult to obtain, but we could look at the sample and look at the percentage that is represented in the sample. We would give that symbol it is red P hat. And obviously there's size differences in between the population and the sample. So when you're talking about the size of a population, you use a capital N, and when you're looking at the size of a sample, we'll use a lowercase n. So since we're going to be using statistics to estimate population parameters, a question naturally arises. So how accurately will this statistic estimate, how accurately will it represent this parameter? Okay. Well, and the answer to that is it depends on how accurately the sample represents the population. And so one concept that we're very concerned with in statistics is we want to make sure that we get a representative sample. That is a sample that represents the population. Okay. Now, how we're actually going to form a representative sample will be discussed later, but for right now, it's important to know that we will need representative samples. So let's work with the difference between populations parameters and sample statistics. So let's say that we have a class of 25 students, and there are 25 students in a single particular statistics class. And then I could say, all right, how many of you have an Android phone? And let's say 21 of the students have an Android phone. In this example, the class of 25 students is actually the population because I have asked only about this single particular statistics class. Okay. And then this value that I obtained from asking the question of 21 of the 25 students have an Android phone. And therefore, this measurement represents the entire population, so it is a parameter. Now, on the other hand, I might be considering this class of 25 students, and again, 21 of them have the Android phone. But suppose I'm trying to say something about the entire population or the entire student body at the school. So let's suppose that this class is actually representative of all of the classes at an institution. In this case, then the class of 25 students is actually just a sample. It is a subset of the entire population, and that value, 21 out of 25, now becomes a statistic.